Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go. Welcome back to another episode of Leaders of the West. And this is a special episode because this is the November bonus episode with Justin Bates, and we're talking all things finance. Justin, thank you so much for hanging out with us again today. We've gotten such great feedback on the episodes that we have shared with you in both September and October. So I'm really excited for what we have planned today and what we have planned for the next few months too, because this isn't the last one of these that we're going to do. We're only halfway through our little 6-month season.
Yeah, glad to be back. These are always fun. And, I've gotten some feedback as well and think it's really helping some folks and getting some people to take action in a good way to better their situation. So yeah, I think we're making progress.
No, we definitely are. So the topic that we're going to talk about today came from you guys. So back when we had first started this series of episodes, I had posted the question box on my Instagram stories, and I asked you, when it comes to finances or investments or anything of that nature, what questions do you have? Because we're planning something really fun. Well, I didn't tell you guys what we were planning, but now you know. And so a number of the questions revolved around this topic, which then is kind of what allowed us to provide you guys today's content. So that being said, these questions come from you guys. We are really passionate about that. So after this airs, I will make sure that we also have another question box up for the episodes that you guys would want to hear in January and February as well, just so that we can always continue to provide you guys with the actual answers to the questions you have, not the questions that we think you have. Because again, that's something I'm pretty passionate about as well. So today we're talking about debt management and leverage. I know that probably doesn't sound very fun, but it is a really, really crucial topic. So Justin, let's just get right into it. Where does somebody start with debt?
Yeah, and I think for people to realize why this topic does come up so often is since we went off of the gold standard when it comes to our currency, we became a debt-based economy. And back when we were on the gold standard, every dollar was backed by the same amount of gold. Well, there was a lot less debt because there was a lot less currency out there floating around. And that's where people could buy a home with cash or get things paid off, etc., because it was that way. Well, when they got off the gold standard, we literally became a debt-based economy, and that's why debt is much more prevalent now than it was 50 years ago. And so obviously it's a much bigger topic today than it was back then. And it's also had to change the way that people view and utilize debt because it's just working in a different manner than it did for maybe our grandparents, etc. So as far as where does one start? All right, the simple place to start is what's your goal? And the goal is going to be, how do we pay off debt the fastest with the least amount of money? That's a pretty standard answer. And for the people that get on Google or YouTube or whatever, there's a lot of people that say, hey, you should always start with the highest interest rate first. Or there's other people say, no, you start with the lowest balance first so you can pay that off and free up that monthly payment to tax something else. And those are two really common strategies. And both of them are good and should be utilized, but there is no black or white, which way is right, which way is wrong. To figure out which route you should go or a combination of both those strategies combined, you really have to just play the math and run the numbers and the calculations of, and it will depend on what is the highest interest rate on the highest balance, the lowest balance. What are the terms on these things? How fast can we get one payment paid off We're going to free that up for another one that may be at a higher interest rate. So you really have to run the numbers and calculations. And there are software programs out there. Of course, we have one that we use to where we can take the guesswork out of it and literally show, okay, based off the numbers, this is how much you have per month to attack this debt with, whatever that number is, that you have available. How can we take that number? Let's say it's $2,000 a month to pay off debt. How can we best utilize that $2,000 a month? And taking the guesswork out of it, use the software. We have calculations we can run for folks and figure out what is the best way to where we can pay off that debt the fastest with the least amount of money. So before we get into that, we should probably define, what is a bad debt? What is a good debt? So we'll just pick one because the other one is just the exact opposite. So Jesse, I'll ask you the questions. Which one you want to go with? Good debt or bad debt?
Let's do good debt.
Okay. So we're going to define what is a good debt. So if we're looking at what's going to be the most preferred debt to have if we're going to have it, okay, is that good debt that we prefer, is that going to have a high interest rate or a low interest rate?
Low interest rate.
Okay. And if we're going to have a good debt, would that be debt that is on an asset that's going to depreciate? Or would it be better if we had debt on an asset that will appreciate?
That is going to appreciate. So not a car.
There you go. Not a car. Well, actually, through 21-22, for the first time in history, a car was actually a good debt to have, believe it or not.
Yes, they were worth more in value than when you initially bought it.
Yeah. So, even then, we always have to plan for the unknown. But generally speaking, for the other 99% of this country's history, then yeah, a car would be a bad debt. So we've got a low interest rate. It's going to be on an appreciating asset. And if we're going to have debt, would we rather have tax advantages attached to it or no tax advantages?
You definitely want tax advantages.
We definitely want tax advantages. And then the last question, this is just a little bit tricky. If we're going to have a debt, would we rather have a long repayment period or a short repayment period?
Ooh.
Now, this one, some people get right, some people get wrong, so no pressure.
No pressure. I'm going to go with, if it has a low interest rate and it's appreciating, I'm going to say a long payment period.
Correct. You're 4 for 4. Give yourself a pat on the back. Yes, a good debt will have low interest rate, appreciating asset, will have tax advantages attached to it, and have a long repayment period. Now, that's one that throws some people off. So do you want to take a guess as to why that is an advantage to have a longer repayment period?
Probably just the idea that it's easier to budget for and around, in my mind.
That is part of it. One, it's easier to budget. Two, whenever you have a longer repayment period, that keeps more cash flow coming into your financial world, which means it allows you to keep more liquidity, access, and control of your money. And anytime we can maintain liquidity, access, and control of our money versus transferring that to somebody else, in most scenarios, that's going to be in our favor. And when you think of an example of this, banks understand that methodology very, very well. And so let's go back and look at if you go in to buy a house, well, even any time, the rate on a 30-year mortgage, I think right now is like 6.2%, I think. Whereas the rate on a 15-year mortgage is 5.6 or whatever. So the question is this. The bank is there to make money off of interest, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So why would the bank give you an incentive, aka a lower interest rate, to do a 15-year term, knowing that you're going to pay them a lot less interest by doing that shorter term? Have you ever thought about that?
No.
If you do 30 years, we're going to charge you 6.2%. But if you do 15, we're going to give it to you for 5.6%. And oh my gosh, look how much interest you are going to save. That's what they'll tell you. That's what the banker says. So it's all about helping the customer. But at the end of the day, we know that bank is not going to prioritize us over them. And so the reason why is the bank knows, and especially if we go back to before rates increased, for a long time we had interest rates that were near zero. And you could get mortgages for 2.7, 2.8, 3.2%. So the reason why the bank was giving all these incentives to pay them less interest is because when you do a 15-year term on a house, as an example, versus a 30-year term, obviously your monthly payment's going to be a whole lot bigger, which means you pay them back faster, which means they get that liquidity, access, and control of their money back faster. It also means the faster you pay them back, the more the risk is put back onto you and off of the bank. And that's also more money that they know they can turn around and go loan out to something else that is more in the bad debt category that they can get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% on.
Interesting. Okay, so I do have a question that I think that maybe our listeners are asking themselves, because obviously you talked about good debt versus bad debt. And we now know the categories, tax incentives, all of this. What are some examples of good debt? I'm thinking a home is going to be one of them.
The easiest way to look at it is look at a house. That's always going to be the number one black and white. That's going to be a good debt because one, you can get a long repayment period. You can have a lower monthly payment on it and keep that cash flow coming into your pocket as much as possible. Number two, we all hope that that will appreciate in value. Number three, we can write off the taxes on the interest. And so all those are good things, and it's an expense we're going to have anyway. We got to live somewhere. And so that's the obvious of a good debt. Another example would be if we got a business loan to start a business that we hope and turns around and earns us money. Obviously, you can get sometimes good rates on business loans, et cetera. But again, that's something that we're going to have a lot of tax advantages if we start a business. We hope that business is going to appreciate in value greatly, right? So those are just examples. When you think of those four aspects, anything that is in that category is going to be a good debt. If you want to go the opposite way, the real easy one is, a vehicle. If you go buy a boat, credit cards are the most obvious because they're super high interest rates. They have extremely short repayment period. You're not getting any advantages to them tax-wise, and they're not going to appreciate in value. And really, if you just ask yourself those four basic questions, it's pretty simple. I mean, people are smart. It's pretty simple to narrow down which is which.
Okay, so let's say somebody has debt. When should you pay off your debt versus saving for yourself or investing? Because I think that that's a question that a lot of people are presented with. They have some debt. They also want to be saving for the time being. They also want to be investing in their future for retirement, kind of what we talked about back in September. Which of those should they be doing first?
We get asked that question a lot. It's like people, hey, I'm at the crossroads and I got 3 different avenues I can go down. Which one do I go down first?
Yeah, which road do I pick?
Correct. And again, like with anything in finance, and I want to remind people, and people are going to get tired of hearing me say this, there is no black and white answer that fits everybody. It's always, always, always going to come down to you and your own personal situation and what all you have going on, all your circumstances looked at together, not just keying in on one thing. And so having that said, if I was going to give a general rule of thumb that you can start with, that again, do your homework before you go down this route. But if you look at where does debt come from, people go into debt whenever they don't have savings. And so as an example, say I've got somebody that's really, really trying to hammer down and do a really good job of paying off debt. So they're keeping a really small amount of money in their checking account. They have a good steady job, so they have good income coming in, but they're literally taking all of it and trying to attack debt. Well, what happens when life happens? We have an air conditioner go out, motor in your car, and you have to replace the car. Whatever that may be, and now all of a sudden, okay, well, now I have to take debt back on because I don't have any savings over here. Well, now we just defeated the purpose. And so I would always, number one, before I attack debt, in most scenarios will be get your, what I call emergency fund built up first. And when I say emergency fund, a good, again, rule of thumb there, everybody's different, but a minimum of 3 months worth of expenses saved up to where if your income stopped tomorrow, do you have enough money put back to where you can still buy gas, groceries, pay the electric bill, all those type of things, make your monthly payments for 3 months at least? Because if you do, if something were to happen to where your income stopped unexpectedly, you have at least 3 months to figure out your next step.
Make a plan of some kind.
Make a plan. And we say all the way up to a year's worth of expenses is fine. And really in between there, it's going to be personal preference. I've got clients that 3 months is perfect for them. I have clients that they want that year is what they're comfortable with, and everywhere in between. But anyway, so once you have that emergency fund in savings, well, then we can move on. Okay, now do we want to allocate towards investing or debt or a little bit of both? And that would really boil down to looking at your debt and saying, okay, do I have good debt or bad debt? Or do I have both? My investments, do I feel like I'm ahead of where I'm going to be for whatever my goal is down the road? Am I behind? Do I need to play catch up there? Those are just going to be factors that you have to look at. But to kind of give the answer at both ends of the spectrum, if you feel like you got some good investments going, they're rocking and rolling, you almost feel like you're ahead of the game there, then I would say, well, go and tackle more debt. If you've got a lot of bad debt that's really costing you with really high interest rates, etc., maybe it's better to at least knock those out. That way you'll have these bigger payments that you can catch up a whole lot quicker on the investment side once they're paid off. And it really just kind of comes down to a numbers game and calculating the math the best you can to figure out which one of those to do, or in a lot of cases, doing a little bit of both, splitting it up. I'm going to invest some and pay off debt some at the same time. That's fine too. But the answer is there is no black or white answer. I would just start with looking at what is my debt? Is it good debt? Is it bad debt? And start there. But I would probably focus on knocking out bad debt first in most scenarios before I would do the investing side.
Okay, so all of that being said, we originally, in the beginning of the show, kind of titled this Debt Management and Leverage. Can you explain to people what is the difference between debt and leverage?
So debt is obviously something, and there is some overlap there. Debt is, if you go buy a boat, you don't have it paid off, that's obviously a debt. You can be paying on that. But leverage is more, if I was going to make it as simple as possible and keep it high level, leverage is more, if I take on debt and use it to increase my income, that's using leverage. And so buying a rental property is a very, very simple scenario that everybody can understand. If you got your home, you got some savings built up, and you're like, you know what, I want to go buy a rental house. Okay. Well, and say that rental house was $100,000. Well, you can figure up how long would it take me to save up $100,000 where I can go pay cash for that. And let's say it's going to take you 5 years to do so. Well, now you go pay cash for the house. But the other avenue is okay, why should I wait 5 years and take all my savings I can and just put it back in a savings account where it's not doing much for me? What if I just went to the bank and used somebody else's money? Let them take the risk. I'll borrow the money. I'll go buy the house now. And then I've got renters in there. They're paying my payment for me. And worst case scenario, if something happens, I need to get rid of it, I can always turn around and sell it. And so that is using the equity in the home, the value of that home as leverage to be able to buy that home quicker, and then basically letting somebody else pay for it for you. That's using leverage, and I don't consider that debt, because if you have $100,000 in debt, but you have a house that's valued at $100,000, do you have a positive or a negative net worth off looking at those two things?
Right. And I can imagine too, kind of the question is, again, is it good debt or is it bad debt? And we've established that a home, tax advantage, appreciating asset, like it is a good investment or good type of debt.
It's a good debt. And again, looking at a home, you really don't have debt because home's worth 100, you got $100,000 mortgage, just to keep the numbers simple. Well, your net worth is balanced out at zero there. You don't have negative net worth because you have debt. You still have the home that's valued at 100,000 too. So if you can do that, use somebody else's money and let them pay it off for you, all the better.
On that topic, real quick, can we talk about things? Because obviously, I think that that's one of the reasons that rental properties or Airbnbs are as successful as they are. What are some other ideas or examples of what would be considered leverage? Because I've gotten that type of question from a lot of people. They want, other income streams or to diversify themselves. And obviously, everybody's first thought is, well, I want a rental property. But that's not necessarily attainable for everybody. Or again, depending if you live in a very rural area, there may not even be available properties. So kind of what are some other leverage examples that you could give?
Leverage examples in a lot of cases are going to come down to people that are entrepreneurs. They want to own something that's, hopefully going to turn out and make them money. Buddy of mine, this is another, again, simple example, but it's a good example. He's a general contractor, builds homes. And don't worry, I'm not using real estate as an example again. But he had figured up over the past 4 months how much he had spent in, because he can do some of the work himself. And so how much he was paying to rent or pay other contractors for these mini X work that they're doing, these mini excavators. And he figured up that number. He's like, dang, that's a lot of money. So then he looked at, well, what if I just went and got a loan and bought my own and just ran it myself? So he called me and said, should I do that? And I said, well, let's look at the numbers and see. So we looked at it. He figured up what he could buy one for. He went to the bank, got a loan for it. So now he's got debt. He bought it, but he set up another LLC for his actually doing the construction work. And he's running his own mini X, paying himself for that. And so he's got this other income stream, and the cost is way, 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 way cheaper. He's actually making money off of it versus spending to hire it out to other people. And so in that scenario, did he take on a debt to buy the mini X? Yes, he did. Did it increase his monthly cash flow? Yeah, by a pretty good amount. And so that is using leverage to increase his monthly cash flow. That's a great debt for him.
I so badly wish that that was not the example that you gave, because I know my husband is listening to this right now. And I cannot tell you how many times he has told me, Jesse, I want to buy a skid steer because we could do things with it here. And then we could also rent it out so that it could be used for snow removal and we could make money on it. And you just absolutely fulfilled his desire. There's now no way, as the professional that you are, that I'm ever going to be able to talk him off the ledge. And I am going to be the proud new owner of a skid steer. Thank you, Justin.
I don't know whether to say I'm sorry or congratulations.
Oh, but hey, gosh.
You can just tell them, they'll be like, hey, look, there's risk involved in this. What if it quits snowing with global warming in Idaho?
Yeah.
What if we never
you
get
hear that,
more?
Justin Jarvis?
Sorry for the terrible example there, but that is an example of where leverage worked out in a very, very good manner for somebody. And I'm sure it will for you and Justin too.
Let's hope so. Okay, I know we want to keep these kind of around the 30-minute mark, so I've got one more question before we let people go today, and that is, should somebody pay extra on their mortgage? Most of the listeners who are listening to this or tuning into this probably own a home, so they are going to have that mortgage. That is a debt. We've assessed that it is a good debt in most cases, but if they have a chance, should they be paying extra on their mortgage?
All right. You asked me the tricky question, because I know a lot of people listening they like the idea of having their home paid for. And so I don't want to make anybody mad by saying, well, not always should you try to pay that off or pay extra. But it goes back down to, again, your own personal preference. And so I do have clients that when we looked at everything and there may have been something better they could have done with their money because it was such a good debt, it still boiled down to their own personal preference was, I just want to have my house paid off. So in that scenario, regardless of what the math would say, that's where I agreed with them. Yeah, for you, that is your best path. Let's take the extra money and put it towards that and pay that off. Personal preference and choice is going to be obviously a driving factor. So I want to put that out first. But I'll give another real case scenario. Let's look at Tiger Woods whenever he built this like $50 million mansion down in Jupiter, Florida. And it was an article came out where he took out like a $30 million mortgage on it. And a lot of people were like, he's a billionaire. Why in the world would he get a 30-year fixed mortgage on $30 million bucks? You know how much interest he's going to pay on that? From the outside looking in at just that level, yeah, that sounds crazy because he's going to pay millions of dollars in interest. But if you break it down to the really, really simple question is, at that time, he probably got, and I don't know Tiger, but he probably got his mortgage probably around 3.2%, I bet. And keep in mind, Tiger's probably got some really good financial planners in his corner and CPAs. So the question is, okay, if I got 30 million in cash here that I could just pay for this thing, if I pay for it, I'm saving 3% interest. But you have to remember, I'm going to be giving up what I could make on that $30 million too. So would I rather save 3% in interest or make 5 or 6% and investing it somewhere?
And I quickly did the math for people. That's an additional $900,000.
In his scenario, if he says, well, I can make more on that than what my interest rate is. So if I can make enough to cover my payments and have some left over, well, that makes sense. 2, he still got in his tax bracket. While you're not going to save a ton of money in taxes on the interest, somebody like that's even making, $400,000 a year, that's going to be some savings there. And 3, that also keeps his liquidity, access, and control of his money. And so that's why somebody like in that scenario would do that. Now, a lot of people that bought a home that are holding on to their homes right now because home mortgages are, 5, 6, 7% now when they used to be 3, and they're hanging on to that 3% interest rate. I think that's smart. And for them, that's where it's like, well, just figure out what you could get, what's the best use of that money, and come to your own conclusion there. I think you'll come to the right one. But fast forward to if we have some people that are just wanting to buy their first home now and say they have a loan that's at 7% on a mortgage, well, you're not guaranteed to invest that somewhere else and get 8 or 9% somewhere else. So in that scenario, maybe it is a better idea to just go ahead and start paying a little bit extra on it and knocking it down. Again, go back to, I would talk with, you can contact us, you can talk to financial planner advisor that you already work with. All that's fine. Talk with your CPA. But at the end of the day, it really needs to look at what other things do you have going on besides just that one debt. Do you have other investments? Are you trying to play catch up there? Do you have plenty of investments and you're kind of set in that regard to where you just have extra money? Well, might as well just pay off some debt with it. By all means, do that. But it just comes to having a deeper conversation. But if you want to keep it really simple, just look at, is it a good debt? Am I saving some taxes on it? And can I do better with my money elsewhere? And the last scenario I'll give on this is a lot of people, if you do the math, and it really is a goal to pay off your house early. I had a client, and this is what we'll end with. I had a client that was their goal. They wanted to have it paid off before they retired. I'm like, cool, let's figure out how to do it. And the money they were paying extra each month was going to have it paid off in, and I don't remember the exact numbers, let's say 11 years is around there. So I said, what if we took that extra money and instead of paying it towards your loan, we put that into an account that we invest conservatively. We can't take a lot of risk with it. And see if around that same mark, 10, 11, 12 years down the road, would we have enough cash sitting there that we could then go and pay off the balance anyway in the same amount of time?
Mm-hmm.
When we did that math, it was actually going to take like 6 or 7 months longer to pay off the home doing it that way. But the reason why they went that route is because they said, well, if during the next 11 or 12 years, we can maintain liquidity, access, and control of that money for the next 12 years, and we only have to give up maybe paying our home off 6 months earlier, I think I'd rather hang on to our cash. Because then when that time comes around, they have the option. Honey, do we want to go ahead and cut this big check and pay off our home? Or do we just kind of want to keep it? What do we want to do now? We have options. Or maybe there's an emergency come up unforeseen along the way that cash would have came in handy.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So those are just things you have to consider and see what's going to fit your situation the best.
Awesome. Well, I think that today has been enlightening. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, and I just want to kind of continue to hammer in, is don't take this advice that you are hearing, whether it is through your speakers or through your headphones, and run with it. The only place we want you to run is to another conversation that is specific with you and your finances, whether that is with Justin or your local financial planner, or, maybe you don't have a relationship with one, but we just want you to start one. Because again, in order to make informed, educated, smart financial decisions, you cannot hear information from a podcast that is very broad and very general and make those types of decisions. Somebody has to sit down and really peel back the layers of your personal financial onion to determine what is right for you specifically. So I just want to encourage you guys to continue today's conversation with your local professional or with who you're using already or with Justin. His information is in the show notes, of course, but I hope you guys have loved these episodes as much as we have. We know that the positive feedback that you guys have given us so far in this process has been awesome, and we hope to continue to do these long term. But any other final things on debt management and leverage before we let them go, Justin?
I think you said it well. Thanks for hitting on that point. It's always going to come back down to not what I say or anybody else. It's going to come down to your own personal circumstances and making it about you. So very well said.
Oh, well, you guys have a great rest of your day. We will be back next month with a brand new topic, so stay tuned. But between now and then, of course, you guys can hear Leaders of the West every Tuesday. We always bring you guys a new guest. Justin will be back on December 5th. So stay tuned and we'll see you then. If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.